What we know about the conflict in Gaza, we know largely because of them. Palestinian press workers covering the war in their homeland while international journalists are barred from entering the territory. They risk their lives to tell the world about their own reality, but increasingly, that reality is making it impossible for them to continue their valuable work. A number of leading news organizations are now expressing concern over their Gazan reporters facing extreme hunger. This as 100 humanitarian groups warn of mass starvation in the territory. I'm Nicole Fröhlich in Berlin, and this is The Day. Now, we only know about the situation in Gaza thanks to, in no small part, to the work of Palestinian journalists working on the ground. Israel doesn't allow foreign journalists to enter Gaza except on tightly controlled embeds alongside Israeli troops. For that reason, global media heavily rely on local reporters. But like the rest of the people in Gaza, they too are affected by aid shortages. Now, news agencies and media outlets are raising the alarm on behalf of their Palestinian colleagues. The Associated Press, AFP, the BBC and Reuters issued a joint statement today. It says, "We are desperately concerned for our journalists in Gaza who are increasingly unable to feed themselves and their families. For many months, these independent journalists have been the world's eyes and ears on the ground in Gaza. They're now facing the same dire circumstances as those they are covering." And we can now speak to Matthew Doran. He's the Middle East correspondent for the Australian broadcaster ABC. He joins us tonight from Jerusalem. Matthew, the Israeli military does not allow foreign journalists into the Gaza Strip. You, like many others, have been relying heavily on the reporting of your Palestinian colleagues. What are they telling you about the conditions they're facing right now?
Well, I think it's fair to say that it is exactly the same as what we are hearing from the broader Palestinian public in Gaza. Our colleagues who are helping us report on this story are Gazans. They are reporting on Gazans, and they are experiencing exactly what Gazans are experiencing: a complete lack of basic supplies of food and other items. They themselves are having to go out there and scramble for whatever supplies they can get their hands on, be it at places like soup kitchens, such as the vision we're currently seeing, or if they are going out to these aid distribution points, private aid distribution points, to try to get access to whatever aid they can. One of our colleagues, and this is something that I found quite startling the other day, of course, reporting on this is one thing, but hearing it from your colleagues is another, as flippant as that might sound. But one of our colleagues said the other day that he simply could not get out of bed, that he didn't have the energy to lift a camera, and that over the last short while, the last couple of months or so, while this crisis has really deepened, he has lost 34 kilograms. Now, this wasn't a big guy to begin with, but it just goes to show how much this is affecting people right across the Gaza Strip and how that situation continues to deteriorate.
Yeah. Give our viewers a sense of how essential these Gazan reporters are for the coverage of the war.
Well, international media are not allowed into Gaza. The only opportunities that the international press get to enter the Gaza Strip is in very tightly controlled and choreographed instances where they are supervised by the Israel Defense Forces. These are called, in the game, they are called embeds, and there are many organizations which do not get the opportunity to go on these embeds. ABC Australia is one of them, while other American and European organizations do get those spots. Now, there is, of course, a debate as to the journalistic merit of those opportunities, but when we are talking about an area that is so tightly controlled, any access is seen as worthy. But in the absence of that, we are entirely reliant on our Palestinian colleagues to go out and source material for us, be that vision, be it interviews, to help us track down people to speak to. We will come up with ideas here in the ABC's Middle East Bureau in Jerusalem, but we are constantly in contact with our colleagues in Gaza to help bring those stories about. And what we're talking about here with the starvation which is affecting the population and affecting our colleagues on the ground, that is quite aside from two other elements here: the massive connectivity issues that exist in Gaza, the internet systems that quite often aren't standing up to the bombardment from Israel. They are experiencing blackouts there as well. And all of this is notwithstanding the heavy toll we have seen in terms of journalists who've been killed during the course of this war. The Committee to Protect Journalists putting that figure at more than 180.
Yeah. Your organization is one of many calling for journalists, international journalists, to be let in and out of Gaza freely. What has the response been to that?
Well, certainly the IDF's official position is that it doesn't allow journalists into Gaza because of safety concerns. Now, that is, of course, a valid argument. This is a war zone that we are talking about. But when we look at other war zones around the world, journalists are allowed in. Take Ukraine, for example. Yes, not allowed into Russia, but certainly allowed to operate within Ukraine. Look at some of the other significant conflicts we have seen over the last short while. It is up to media organisations to take those calculated decisions as to whether or not to send crews into those places. For Israel to say that it is not allowing people in because of those safety concerns, that is something which has been roundly rejected by international press working in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. The Foreign Press Association, which represents international media organisations, is trying to battle this ruling by the IDF through the Israeli courts. However, that is a process which has been delayed and adjourned a number of times and still has not been dealt with there. So there is this situation which has developed where Israel consistently rejects the information and the stories that are coming out of Gaza, saying that they cannot be trusted, that this is Hamas propaganda which is being put out there for the world to see, but at the same time does not allow international media into Israel to try to, into Gaza, I should say. It does allow international media into Israel, but into Gaza, it doesn't allow them in there to do that work while dismissing the vital work that our Palestinian colleagues do.
Yeah. As a result of this policy, Gaza journalists have long worked under tremendous strain and a double burden, really, the fear for their lives and the lives of their loved ones and the responsibility of telling the world about the reality they are experiencing. How have your colleagues been able to keep reporting until now?
I mean, that is a question that I don't really know the answer, because there is only so much that sitting here in the relative safety of Jerusalem that you see what they're going through. You speak to them every day, and their fortitude, their bravery just is astonishing. You never quite know what to say to them, but you hear from them about the, as you said there, the weight that they feel at wanting to tell this story to make sure that the world can see what is happening in their community. And I think it's that sense of purpose which really drives a lot of them, and it is incredibly admirable to see that each and every day, and to work with people who are prepared to, in this instance, put their lives on the line to ensure that this incredibly important story, arguably they're one of the biggest stories anywhere in the world right now, can be shared with a broader audience.
Do you feel like right now, from where you are, there's anything you can do to help your colleagues?
I think the thing that most journalists covering this war will, or the way that most people will answer that question, is to ensure that we are telling that story, that we are supporting our colleagues as best we can under these incredibly trying circumstances, and making sure that the legwork, the hard graft that they are putting in on the ground, often at great personal cost, to get these stories out, that we, as we receive that information and we work with them to tell those stories, that we get it out to as large an audience as we possibly can, because that is the role of a journalist, to try to shine a light on what is happening in these communities, to try to add not only information but add context to what we are seeing there, and to explain how this situation has developed, both in terms of Israel's bombardment of Gaza but also Hamas's position here. Hamas are not without fault when it comes to this situation. They are, of course, responsible for the October 7 attacks, which led to this conflict, this current conflict kicking off. They have a role to play in the negotiations and the way in which this has developed over the course of many, many months. But what we can do to support our journalists is to not only tell them that we are there for them, that we are there to support them however we can and however helpless we might feel at times. You know, there's no greater fear than when you message them on WhatsApp and you see one tick next to the message saying the message has been sent but it hasn't been delivered, and then you sit there agonizing for a couple of hours hoping that the message does go through, that they haven't been injured or killed overnight. What we can do is to support them and ensure that the hard work that they're doing is actually getting out to our audiences at home and around the world.
That was the ABC's Matthew Doran. Thank you so much for your time, and all the best to your colleagues in Gaza, truly.